Okay, so I'll start very, very basic, as I said, very quickly. If you haven't done it yet, you should install Eclipse Mars, the newest version, very important. And you should install the modeling version of it. And so, as Rogart said, I've worked a lot with Eclipse, developing plugins and so on. And my experience is, whenever you do something new, install a new version of Eclipse or use a new workspace at least. Because otherwise, you're, I think, 160 or something this year?
Yeah, from 140.
Yeah. It might not be a problem for a single person, but we'll get a lot of issues in total that people come, this doesn't work. And quite often it has to do with different installations, different plugins. So please, if you want to spare yourself and us trouble, download a fresh version of Mars and install it. Very easy, go to download, and then you can use this installer here that they have since the new version. So you just download your version. If you think this is ridiculous, believe me, I had people in the master program coming to me with a Mac and trying to install a Windows version. So that's why I really go through these things. But it will be quick. Good. Once you've downloaded that, you get this thing here, Eclipse Installer, and you just run it. As an installation works, this thing is a little bit advanced because you can basically choose your product. So you don't only download an executable, run it, but you have different versions. And as I said before, please use the modeling tools because there's a lot of stuff that you will use later already installed. And then the other thing you'll need, so here on the next page you can basically select different things you would like to have. And here, of course, as we use Papyrus, who would have thought of that? Please choose Papyrus. Here, so just double click on it and it will turn up here, it will be installed. That's basically all you need. If you want to use Git, if you want to use version control sharing within your group, then you'll also need UML compare, which is basically, yeah, as it says, the tool to compare graphically models. And I think there's somewhere, yeah, you'll also need these two here. EMF compare, EMF diff merge, because they are under it basically. Yes, and EMF core is also not wrong. And then you just click next and a lot of stuff happens. This you should all manage to do, I think. So I won't install it here because it takes a while. But of course I've already done that, surprise, surprise. So once you're done, you start Eclipse, and well, this is nothing surprising to most of you, I think. And you have to choose a workspace, so basically the folder where everything you do goes into. For those of you who haven't used Eclipse. Doesn't matter what, you can just use the default that it proposes and press OK. By the way, interrupt me if you have any questions at any time. And now this is funny because this screen doesn't show the entire. Okay, now it should work. So in the video this will look a bit stupid because on the side there is still space that this projector doesn't show. All right, so this is the Eclipse, well, how it looks like when you've installed it. And, well, some basic things is these small windows, these small tabs here are called views. So you have different views that show you different things, whatever you want to have. That's kind of the basic of Eclipse, and usually here in the middle you have an editor where you can, for example, write Java code or do the modeling. And then there are so-called perspectives. They are hidden up here. And if you click on this open perspective here, you'll get one that's called Papyrus. If it's not there, you probably haven't installed Papyrus. Anyway, if you click OK, the looks kind of change, not that much. But the whole idea of perspectives is kind of default settings for which windows are being shown and so on. And you see now basically that here you have things like model validation, so they are related to Papyrus directly. And here you'll have the model explorer and an outline. This you will need once you start working. And up there, that's kind of the usual stuff in Eclipse. Here you see all your projects that you can do. Good. That's the basic stuff, sort of. But when you're here, it's already a good start. What you can and should do now is creating a project. So there are different kinds of projects, Java projects, whatever. Again, it's basically a collection of things, a folder with stuff in it. And Papyrus is a special kind of project. So if you want to work with Papyrus, you just say new Papyrus project. And then you get this window here. And there's a lot of stuff you can do there. You can also install extensions, then you get a lot more here. But basically, well, I hope you know what UML is by now. So that's the method of choice. You might learn more about profiles later. I don't know what the plan is this year, but not in depth. So this is not really relevant to you. This is also not really relevant to you. These are basically different languages. So we click next, and then we have to choose a name. And I'll give a good example and choose a nice name and not test like I did here. Whatever, MDSD Sting demo. And then you can also, if you want to, you can choose a name for your model, but it doesn't really matter. So I usually leave it at model. Next. And again, you can choose a lot of stuff. I just say finish. But basically, you can already start creating different diagrams if you want to, but you can all do that later. Excellent. Now we have a project up here, as you can see. And here we have also opened something, but it doesn't really show that much yet. And here we also have something, the root element. So this is where our model starts, and this is where we start working, basically. And I think now it gets interesting. Have you discussed the difference between a diagram and a model?
No.
Not? Good, then we do that now. Because that's kind of central for this tool. And that's also one reason why we use, for example, Papyrus and not a drawing tool. I think a lot of you have probably used editors on the internet to draw use cases and so on. But here you really have to understand what a diagram and what a model is. So a model has a lot of elements. For example, you can have classes, like you've learned. You could also have, well, you could have another class with an attribute, ID, indicator, you know all that stuff. But you can also have other stuff in the same model. You can have an actor in the model, which would have to do something with the use case diagram, right? Or you can have an activity from an activity diagram. And all of this together is your model. Now, if you draw a class diagram, for example, that's basically a graphical representation of your model. And it can be of a part of your model. So if I want to have a class diagram, I could say the class diagram is only showing this part. Or I could even have another class diagram that just shows this part. So the overall thing is the model, and the diagrams, they only show a part of it. Of course, they can also show the whole thing. But in general, you'll end up with a massive model, but you have a lot of smaller diagrams that just show parts of it. And as you know, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to have a class diagram that shows activities and actors. You can actually do that, but usually it doesn't make a lot of sense. So,
excuse me?
Yes?
Are you familiar with the project that we have been
Yes,
assigned?
I guess so if you haven't changed
so
it.
Our whole hotel system that we're going to develop,
Yeah.
would that be one single God model?
It could be, yeah. Usually it is. What you can do is, and I'll get to that later, you could, on a file basis, you can split up those in different files. But it's one model. And you usually have ways, I mean, as in if you could say here, this is my file system and I have a single hard drive. Everything is on there, does it make sense or not? But that's why you have things like folders, packages, and so on. And that's the same in the model. So you will probably have one model, but you can split up, you can structure a lot of it. But usually, I mean, in the past, you didn't remodel everything that you did so far. So the class diagram will be in here, but not the use case diagram, for example. Because you won't really have a use of that on the computer. It's good that you use it for basically exploring, for finding out what you really want to do, but it doesn't make sense for this project to put it, to create it digitally and maintain it in this model. Good. Now we want to do something with that is not as white here. And for that you can use this Model Explorer down here. I don't really need the outline, I think. I'll make it a bit bigger just to show what I'm doing here. If you right click on this, you can do a lot of stuff. Probably half of it you don't. You can create tables. I have never used them, but for a bigger project they should be quite useful. But basically, new child shows you everything that UML has, more or less. There is quite a bit more, but you will know some things. I mean, you know activity, you know actor, you know class, but there's so much strange stuff that I don't even know what it is. Opaque behavior, opaque expression, blah, 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 whatever. But you can basically start creating stuff here. You could say I want to have a class, I want to have another class, I want to have an association between class, and here it already gets interesting because it doesn't show here, and I want to have a use case. Because that's cool. Here you can create elements, and that's basically the same as in every Windows Explorer or the Finder in Mac, right-click new, right? So this is your model, and that's what I did earlier, what I said. I mean, I'm starting to mix stuff here now. I have classes, I have, what was it, a use case? Yeah. That's not really in the same diagram. So if I want to have a diagram, surprisingly, I can also right-click here and say new diagram. And now you get, again, more or less every single diagram that UML offers. And let's start with the class diagram. Yeah, excellent names. And now, if I go back here, now this picture shows a little bit more because you have something open down here, and you also have some a palette here on the right side that you can use to create stuff. I can do that. So if I click here and create a new class, you will see here that this class also turns up in the model. So this is a view on the model. And this is exactly what I said earlier. My model has 3 classes, but the class diagram I just created only shows one of them. So it could be a part of the model. If I have something already here and I want to have it up there as well, I can just drag it in. So here we go. Now my class diagram shows 2 out of these 3 classes, and if I pull this one here as well, it shows all 3 of them. So it's basically the same thing. All right, let's speed up a bit. It's much more fun in the graphical representation to do things like associations, right? You just click on it, click here, and you have an association. That's quite a bit of work down here to do the same thing. So I would never do that. One more interesting thing, and that's be very careful with that. What does it mean if I delete something here? It could be. So that depends. I actually don't know what happens if I just press delete here. Now it actually disappeared from the model as well. I think there's if I use backspace, it actually doesn't do anything. But you can do right click and say delete from diagram or delete element. And one of them is throw it out of the model. The other one is just basically remove it from the diagram. So be aware that there are 2 different things to do this.
Shift delete. That's it.
Yep, exactly. Boom. Yeah, this is not that much fun on this. Yeah, so now it's still here, but I deleted it from the diagram. So be aware of these different ways to delete something, what delete really means. And this can cause huge problems in diagrams in your model. Especially, and you'll get to that next week, if you do sequence diagrams, you use exactly these classes. You talk about these classes. So if you suddenly delete something in your class diagram, it disappears from your model, then it might be that your sequence diagram also gets invalid and so on. So I would say if you really want to delete something, do it here. There was also, in the past, there was a bug that sometimes if you deleted stuff here, it didn't really disappear. So I usually really, when I want to delete something, I do it here. Adding is fine here, that works perfectly well. Good. What else can we do here? I haven't shown you this down here. This is the properties view. Highly confusing because it shows you the whole thing that UML can do. And again, I don't know if you've looked at the standard yet, but I think the standard has around 800 pages or so. And that's not just text. I mean, there is something in there. So, for example, if I only click on this association, it shows me massive amounts of information down here. Right? I can give the association a name. Then it shows up here. I can, of course, I have different visibilities, blah blah. You have different names for the actors on both sides. So I can say this is whatever, Peter. And here we have Anna, for example. And a lot of details. For example, I'm quite sure you haven't talked about this dot here, but that's another thing in UML that actually has a meaning. So that basically means who owns the association. If you would generate code from this, class 2, class 3, it would mean where do we add an attribute? Do we add it as class 3 or a class 2? That's more or less what it means. But there's so much stuff here. So yeah, it can be a bit confusing, but it all has a sense actually for certain purposes. Multiplicities are important. You will need them, of course. And you know what they are. And then there's a lot of other stuff. You can add comments if you feel like. You can add profiles. You haven't learned about them yet. You can give them different colors if you feel like. Appearance, blah, blah, blah. So there's so much stuff down here. You won't need, you will probably need 10% of that, max. But anyway, down here you do all the things. What else is important? Of course, this is a class diagram, so you should be able to add some attributes. They're called properties here. And you can add them only there where they belong. So if you go here, you can't add an attribute, but if you click on here, it starts appearing. And then again, you will need down here, you will need this to give it a name, to give it a type. For example, I can click on here, and surprise, surprise, I don't have any types. Because types are not standard. They might be standard in a programming language. But they might be different in another one, right? If you program PHP, then you don't have any types, for example. If you program C++, you have different types than in Java. So keep this in mind. When you model, it's not always mappable one-to-one to a language. So what can we do for that? I think that's probably an important thing. And I haven't done this in a while, so I have to find out how it works again. It was load resources. Import, yeah. Import, maybe this one, we'll see. Registered package, yeah. And then we have Java primitive types, for example, or UML primitive types. If I say import, then there's a lot of stuff showing up here. That's basically links to other models. But now, if I click on my attribute again, I hope I'll have a type. I can go here in UML primitive types and say integer. Okay? Yes.
Is it possible to write UML code and import it into Papyrus? I think there is some form of standard
yes.
UML code which you can write.
Yes, you mean using another tool, for example?
Using Papyrus, can you write the code and then import it? If you don't want to work graphically and then just write the code.
But do you really want to write it by hand?
It's faster, much faster.
Writing this by hand?
Well,
that's a standard.
That's standard?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
But there are...
I thought the standard was...
Yeah, and I mean, this is a pretty basic model, right?
XML, stupid stuff.
Yeah, and the cool thing is, of course, if you really don't like Papyrus, you can start doing all the diagrams, and most tools will be able to export them in the standard. And then you can import them. That works, for example, but no guarantee that it really does. The other thing is, UML specifies this. UML doesn't specify how the diagrams look like. So in here, these are the actual files. There is the UML file, which contains the model here, but there is the notation file. That's the graphical stuff. And that actually has a completely different... It's also XML, but it looks differently. So this is the graphical stuff that I've just drawn, because it has stuff like graphical position, right? Where is the element and so on. So if you would like to do the whole thing, you actually would have to write 2 files like that, and they should be compatible.
Is it possible to import like Java interfaces maybe?
You mean writing an interface in Java and then importing the transfers it?
Right.
I'm sure there are tools for that, but I'm not sure they are in there. I'm quite sure they're actually not. Because there are different ways to do this, depending on how you go the other way. You could, for example, now I closed my model. In Java, this one-to-many association could mean that there is a list here. It could also mean there's an array list here. It could mean there is a collection here. It could mean that there is an attribute in here. So there are different ways to display the same thing, and that's why I said there is no one-to-one mapping. And usually you will see that, and a lot of you will get frustrated, but when you will generate code from your class diagrams. And there are a lot of things that you basically have to define, because they're not clear by themselves. But yeah, I won't scare you with that too much. We'll get to that. Good! That's the class diagram, more or less. There is, of course, there are all the other diagrams, and I won't go into all of them, but for example, I think you know activity diagrams, right? They are here, and you can do all the cool stuff there. What else? Yeah, anyway. You've seen that. You have done component diagrams, right? Okay. That's a bit special. Maybe I should show that shortly. Have you used the connector notation? Yeah. So you have 2 components here. And you've used something like that, which basically means, well, for example, you could call this IF requires, IF provides. So here you have an interface where component A provides some functionality, component B uses or requires that functionality. The problem is, this thing here is basically it's syntactical sugar, it's not UML standard. So this one is, you see that in most books, you see that basically everywhere, but UML has a standard, has a different way to handle that. And I should probably really show that. Because that can be a bit strange if you look in, I looked for the connector last year and I couldn't find it. And I thought it was ridiculous, and at some point I actually opened the standard and okay, it showed me that this was the correct way to do it. What you basically do here is you create that interface. So instead of drawing a circle saying this is my interface, you have to be specific. What is it? What is it called? So here I have an interface, and you can do all the stuff that you can with interfaces, right? Give it methods, for example, operation, whatever, add B. This is an operation in my interface, and now you have to say, and then let's see whether I still get that. You can say component 1 realizes this interface, provides it, and component, now I should be careful, yeah, the other component uses it. That's the official notation, and that means exactly the same as here. And the whole idea is that it makes it obvious. Instead of having a circle and you have no idea what it actually means, you have, as in the class diagram, you have the interface saying this is the interface.
What's the difference between usage and dependency? Don't they look exactly the same?
Yes, well, let's see what they do. Here they do, yeah. I actually don't know. I would have to check the standard. But I guess as they look the same, your teachers will probably not care that much if you draw a component diagram like that. Okay. let's see, it's like that, so I still have a bit of time. Let's see whether I manage all of this. I'll show you a couple of tricks that are very handy when working with Papyrus. One of them is linking stuff. For example, you could say I have a component in here, and what's inside the component is actually this class diagram, right? I have a bunch of classes in my component. What you can do is that you simply set a list, a link here. So I just go hover over the component and add plus, and then I can add links. I can say add a link to a specific object, and that's my class diagram. And I can also set it to default. When I do the same again, it does or it doesn't. It shows me this. So if I click down here, it opens the class diagram. I can also just double click on it, and it opens it as well. So you can kind of link through your model. That's yeah, might be helpful, might be not, up to you. The other thing, and that has to do if you actually work with version control and if you work collaboratively on one model, is splitting up stuff into different files. So up here you have one file, or in reality it's 3 different files, but that's your whole model. And imagine using version control on a Java file that has 10,000 lines of code and 30 people working on it. It's not a lot of fun to do merge and so on. It's probably still better than a model. I mean, you've seen the text representation, but it's still not fun. So what you usually do in Java, for instance, is you split up stuff, and you can do that here as well. So what you could do is create packages. For example, I put all my class stuff in here, and what else do I have? Let's say, whatever. Let's say the rest goes here. And then I just go about and select everything that has to do with my class diagram, including the diagram itself, and put it in there. And everything else I put into the rest package, including the diagrams. So now I've cleaned up a little bit, and then I say right-click, create submodel, and I can give it a name, blah blah blah. Press OK, and once I save it, I get another file here. So now I've moved everything to another file, and you can do that as much as you want. Of course, you have to be careful that all of the files are there, all of them are consistent, and so on. Otherwise, well, I can show you what happens otherwise. If I say delete, I delete one of my submodels. Yes. Then this one will probably complain. Nah, it's not too bad because I only, yeah, but down here it shows, for example, unresolved tab. Right? There is, the stuff I'm referencing is in another model, so it can't show it. Let's get it back. Everything is back, and yeah, and not. Alright, now it still has those things down here, but that's okay. Yeah, but now my diagrams are back. So that's one way of splitting up everything, and it's quite easy to say you work on the activity diagram, you work on the class diagram, for instance. Yes, so far so good. I think I still have 10 minutes. Any questions so far? Excellent. Let's make it, I'll make a try and show the Git stuff. As I said, I haven't tried this too hard, so it might go wrong. Let's close this one, because conveniently this is also called model, as all my models. This is a very fancy class diagram. It has 2 classes, I think. They are here. And that's all. And I have another workspace where I have another clone of this Git repository, and I'm basically, all I want to show now, not too fancy, I'll just make some changes and show you how that looks like in the other diagram. And anyway, 3 classes, that's all. I do a quick commit here. And it seems to work, okay. And now I switch, so now I'm another person working with the same model, which is lying on some Git repository somewhere. And usually what Git does, it shows you the text. Here's a merge. This is what they added. And you've seen the XML is not really understandable. And the problem is that sometimes if you move stuff in your models, the IDs get regenerated. So it's not that easy to do a merge on a text basis. And that's, for example, a massive problem we had with Bridgepoint in the past, where the model files were actually binaries, and there was no way to share them. Let's see. Here I'm still up to date, so I have to say pull the new version. No, I should also first make some changes maybe. So for example, I make some conflicting changes here. I rename this class and I delete this one. Now I do a commit here. I also say test or something like that. And I'll probably, if everything goes fine, I'll get a conflict now. Problems, blah blah, model is not okay. Yeah, if the model is still open, it will crash because it does the merge on a text, so suddenly it's not an XML file anymore. And if you go in here, you'll see here and here we have conflicts. And you can basically go into the merge tool, and if you have this EMF compare installed, it should show you this. So the original version is this, and this is alright because the model is not very big, but if you would do this with a proper thing, there's no way you understand this properly. So you'll probably mess up the whole thing. But here you have the graphical compare, so you can actually do the same as you would usually do in a merge tool. You say, okay, please use the right version of the diagram and so on. Good. This worked surprisingly well. Let's see whether it works with the notation. So the notation, as I said earlier, is basically the diagrams. And that's where it gets interesting, because if you move an element, it should also cause a different version, for example. And here it looks like I haven't installed the proper thing. Yeah. So here I have a problem because it still shows me the text stuff. That's not very nice. I'll have to look into what you actually have to install. But there is another plugin where you get the graphical view, and you see this has been moved, this has been deleted, this has been renamed. Yes?
Is there no way to use auto layout all the classes?
No. No, it's not. This is actually, I'm a bit annoyed by that as well, because I would like to do something like he said earlier. I would like to create a model somewhere, it doesn't have to be Papyrus, and just say, I want these in a diagram, please create them more. But the problem is, this is a whole research area, how to lay out diagrams or how to lay out graphs. Graphs are easy because they have nodes, edges, but the diagrams are not because they have a lot of elements. I hope they will have it at some point, but so far they don't. What you can probably do is, if really everything goes wrong, and I would always in the beginning create backups here, but if it really goes wrong, you can always create a new diagram and just pull the elements in again, because it's only the graphical representation. It's usually much less work if you have a proper model than the other way around. Okay, yeah, I'll check that and tell you or someone which plugin you should exactly use, that this also works. And then one last thing, for those who haven't used Git before, and for those who haven't used it enough and so on, I think Git itself you have to get very used to. In the beginning you mess up everything. And again, I think most of the complaints we got last year, this doesn't work, this is so bad, was regarding people that just tried to use it and messed up their whole Git repository because they did strange commits and so on. So try to get used to this workflow that you usually go through when you work with Git. If you do it. Try it out. Good. I think I'll be back on Tuesday.
Yes, I hope so.
We'll see.
Quite useful.
If I feel like.
Yes.
So if you have questions, you can keep them for Tuesday. And then
I think it's one important thing is that, I mean, now we went through the tool, that
Yeah.
I really try it out between now and Tuesday. Because if not try it out, then it's not useful in some sense. You know?
Yeah.
I think really you should.
And I think I would like to cover on Tuesday how you generate code from class diagrams.
Yes.
And for that you should really know how to create and work with class diagrams, because there are some tricky things there.
Do they
really
still
help you if you're looking at the 2D
do they
board
still
and-
generate those trash
Yes.
EMF
Yes.
stupid stuff?
Yes, we do.
Do that.
No, it's not.
So it's no question time today, but on Tuesday you can have some question and we dialogue and thing, no? And I think
I hope so.
thank you very much for fantastic talk. And I want to leave with you in the classroom for 5 minutes before we have a break and you know.
Good, thank you.